right, now it's 6 times the speed. Thank you, voice from above. I needed you. You are the real hero today. Um, New software does not like Windows. Neither do I. I'm a Linux person. So, that said, this is the slide that we talked about 3 times, and the other slide that we talked about 3 times. Look, it's me and pizza bagels and some EL wire. So that's cool. Already introduced myself. We're not going to do that. That's awkward. Love this slide. Went through that as well. Most importantly, iButtle. And then this is your invitation. One error on this slide that everyone should note: 11 a.m. CDT. We're not there yet. So we are traveling through time at the speed of, oh my God. So we are entering a data center. I'm going to take a deep breath and set the scene. We are doing this in the style of what? Clue. Because that is exactly where my mind goes. And I'll be honest, I have watched that movie more times than I probably should admit. So we've all been invited by Mr. CISO. And upon arrival, there's a reverse shell on a Mitel server in the lobby. An unpatched MoveIt server is online down the hall. A strange dongle lies abandoned in the bathroom. And an encrypted ESXi cluster lay helpless beyond 2 badge readers and a bioscan. This is the AI art I was referencing. I just want to shout out to Investigator Chick, who has me on Signal, who stopped me while I was rambling about this. But everybody, for the first time ever, knock off Gritty. Please enjoy. This is what AI art will get you if you're not good at art or AI. Among the guests today, you notice with you the Vuln manager, the C-levels, the director of security, and general counsel. But also, you. You are the most important person here today. And if anybody gets this image, you get all the points in the world. So, what's happening here? You have a reverse shell. You have a MoveIt server. You have a dongle. It could be any of these bad guys. Is it Panda Shenanigans? Is it Clop or some other spider? Is it an insider threat? Here's why we go through this first. So, real story and kind of what the idea here today is. This should feel as hectic as possible, and thanks to technical issues, it already does. When you come into an IR, if you haven't been already, I want to take you through a day in my life, and a day in the life of incident response, whether you be consultant in-house, whether you be a CISO or an analyst. Maybe you work in the SOC, maybe you work in the NOC. I'm not Dr. Seuss, so that's the only rhyme you're getting today. You could be the Vuln manager. You could be, just some sys engineer who gets wrapped into something, or you do application development. IR affects everyone. And the first question we're usually asked is, who could this be? Who are we dealing with? And there are a couple of reasons why we get that question first. But speculation is bad, right? For a couple of reasons. If you talk to a lawyer or an insurance company, speculation is bad because if you get it wrong, sometimes insurance doesn't pay. If you are premature about it, maybe you miss something. Or you go after one threat and there's something nefarious happening over in a completely different cluster. What happens with ransomware most of the time is folks assume this is Windows. This is all happening on Windows. Bad. Don't do that. Check everything. Really, it should be a versatile approach that goes multiple levels, and we'll go into that. So speculation bad, logs good. We like logs. Logs are our best friends. We would write a poem to logs if we had any skill about poems. We might own couch cushions that look like logs. We very much are a fan of logs. So whenever you go into anything, mystery, case, abandoned haunted house, data center with knockoff gritty in it. You want to go in with no biases and no presumptions. Probably the most important time to go in without bias actually is in one of our big baddie cases that we said, hey, could it be this? And that would be insider threat. We tend to forget that there are actual humans behind things. And that means lives, right? So if you're doing an insider threat case, go in not thinking, oh, yeah, this person definitely did it, but more along the lines of, okay, what's our scope? What exactly are we looking for? And are we going to prove or disprove that? And it's very scientific in nature. So every great mystery asks questions. We shouldn't begin with any kind of statements. We should always begin with a question. So we're trapped in this presentation together now. Sorry, or also yay. So let's ask some questions. How did they get in? Somebody's in. There's bad things happening. How did it happen? Are all of the events related? Holy crap. We have a reverse shell, a move it server, a weird dongle, and an ESXi cluster that's down. What the heck? Those things don't seem related. Well, maybe they are and maybe they aren't. We should assume nothing. We should ask. What was successful and when did it happen? So timelining. Everybody loves timelining. Folks often ask, what is the number one tool you use in digital forensics and incident response? And people usually stop listening to me after I say the real answer, which is Excel or Google Sheets. So that's a thing. It's real. Did anything get taken? The lawyers really care about this one because this has the most implication, especially with sensitive data types and things like that. Did anything get taken is super important. And then, are things still happening? People lose sight of this. You just look at, hey, something bad happened. Let's look backwards. Don't. IR is a full circle. It is chaos incarnate. It's looking backwards in time at the same time you're monitoring and going, is this still going on and have we remediated it, and starting taking actions to actually contain things. So huge deal here. Are things still happening? Plus whatever else this guy wants. Listen to counsel. They are there to protect you almost all of the time. So moving room by room, let's look at the Mitel first. We know there's a reverse shell, but what else can we see and find? So we've got our reverse shell here. Looks like it happened Thursday, June 1st at 1:25 GMT. Okay, but what else? So what do we know about Mitel servers? Well, typically Nix-like operating system. So do we see any network connections? We can netstat it and kind of look at what's live. Do we have any live connections still going out to this? Are there any SSH events? So are there any pivots to maybe authenticate? Do we even have that port open? Do we find any cron jobs on it? Do we find any rootkits? Looking for more persistence. Any user creations since this time? But also, when was this shell actually created? We'll move on. The Move It server down the hall seems much more on fire. Everybody cares about Move It right now if you've been affected by Move It. If you haven't, it's just a bunch of people screaming on Twitter, and congratulations for dodging this bullet. It's actually kind of great software. I'm going to hand it to them. I've worked more of these than I'd like to admit over the last 2.5 weeks. So this got added to this presentation very, very recently. And the reason is there was some disservice done to this. The exploit is actually fairly complex. It's a 4-part exploit, not just a SQL injection. So I digress. An O-Day happened, and we know that MoveIts are affected. A lot of folks showdanned themselves. A lot of folks showdanned other people. But we know that a couple of things have to be true for this to be viable. So first of all, is this thing even online? Do we have HTTP, HTTPS open? is it open to the world? We have a quick SQL query and parameters for success here of let's look at where the log time is back on a certain date. So it's past May 26th. Why May 26th? Well, Move It hit by and large the 31st to the 1st, and then we saw it die down. So that becomes super important because we never want to assume that we're not seeing the first iteration of threat actor activity. So whatever the main event date was, move it back a few days or even a week. Depending on how verbose your logs are, assume nothing. Error equals 0. So when you're looking at the Move It vulnerability and Move It cases in general, this is really looking for those file download events. So it's, in a sense, it's file transfer, it's FTP software. So it's transferring files. It gives you this nice log. And again, hat tip to the people who make it. The logs in this have been great. There is an action called file download. So you're sorting off of that action. And error equals 0 means, hey, it was probably successful, because they also have pretty good error logging in there as well. So you want to see, and this is what this is asking in a sense, is exfil. Did exfil happen on this Move It server? Because by and large, what has been seen here is this human 2.aspx or another shell. So you do want to check and not just assume based on naming conventions. Did you have any kind of web shell creation on this device under that root account or under that root directory during this time frame? And because this was interacting on the application layer, that's why we're looking at the SQL logs. And we might want to also look at network flow data as well. So why would we do that? Yes, you have logs on a device, and it's saying, hey, you have your action of file download. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold. Actually, I'm getting over something pretty serious, but took meds before this. So you have your file download and you have this error equals 0. You really want to get as many layers to that story as possible to help give different data, because what it's not going to tell you in this, it might give you a file name. It's not going to give you file. It's not going to give you across the wire that file activity, because this is your log on a host. So you want that network log, if you can get it, to give you bytes in, bytes out, which is incredibly valuable. Your lawyers will love you for it. Your incident responders will love you for it. Your C-levels will love you for it. Everybody's a fan of network flow data. Caveat that I've always had to talk about is when you're looking at transfer of any kind, you have packet headers, and you usually have some kind of compression in transit. For Move It, that was true. There was file compression happening there. So you very rarely get a one-to-one, but if you're worried about what left and in what kind of chunking, this really helps answer that question. The last question everybody's panicked about, are we showing up on any kind of data leak site? That information isn't going to come from inside the house. You'll have to look outside. So partnering with some kind of intel, I would strongly recommend not spinning up your own anything and wantonly poking around at threat actor data leak sites and giving them any kind of information. So some partnership there, or if you're one of the analysts who is good at that sort of thing, doing it yourself, but doing it safely, use Tor. Room by room. Let's go down to the bathroom. There's a strange dongle in the bathroom. Hat tip to AI art. I'm sure you can tell this is AI generated. Pretty good, actually, for this one. No knockoff Gritty, though, so points off for that. So we don't even want to touch it. We don't want to put it in any computer. We will ensure the USB is not writable to disk when we do go to analyze this, and we should probably use gloves. So, fun fact, sorry. Before I did digital forensics, I did medical forensics. I was an autopsy technician. And I thought, in my naivete, if I switch to computers, nothing will ever be disgusting again. Oh, how wrong I was. So if you do want to go into digital forensics and incident response, just something to know about. Humans are kind of gross creatures and do kind of gross things. And they touch keyboards, and they touch cell phones, and they touch laptops and all of the things that you'll be working with. So one thing I learned very, very early on in digital forensics is, hey, those gloves that you used when you were an autopsy tech, man, are they useful for doing digital forensics as well? Because you might not want to touch some things. So just extra content for today. Gloves are amazing. To always wash your hands. So we're looking at this thing. It has a lot of company files from the ESXi servers on it, and it has a suspicious.exe file. I wonder what that is. So we should probably reverse that or match hashes against a database. So we've got that going in the background. Let's move on. Oh yes, follow me for more USBs with threatening auras on Instagram. So there's a knock at the door. We regret to inform you, one of your IT team members, Mr. Merp, has clicked on a fish. Upon inspection, it looks like Vidar, which is a credential stealing malware. It basically grabs things from the browser layer. It will grab cookies, credentials, anything the person's logged into. It will associate those credentials with the domain. You lose 30 minutes of your time. You network contain Mr. Merp's machine, and you hand it to an analyst to ensure nothing else has happened. Mr. Merp's account is reset, and he is given a fresh laptop and some corporate trainings. Oh, look, we lose time. I baked it into my presentation, not knowing I would have technical difficulties. This is fantastic. So back to the rooms. The ESXi cluster in the data center. Someone has encrypted the cluster using the vCenter account. Encryption began at 02:35:32 UTC on June 1st, 2023. This is odd. It was encrypted at the machine level, not the hypervisor layer. So what does that look like? In ransomware cases, we can sometimes see both, and you should look for both. When it's at the hypervisor layer, there's usually a script or a string that will go towards the whole cluster, and it takes that up and down into account. And so if you were to introduce anything to the new cluster, either way, it's basically meant to run against anything it's networked to, which is bad, which is why we use the Ghostbusters meme quite often when talking about ESXi of don't cross the streams. This is not like in the end when they're like, oh no, really, go ahead and cross the streams. Don't be Egon, never cross the streams. You never want to introduce a backup or a clean VM to an encrypted cluster. Consider that thing hosed unless you have a decryption key, and even then treat with extreme caution. You're best off kind of salvaging space and creating a new cluster over here. So this is odd though, because in most of the recent cases, it has trended towards encrypting at that hypervisor layer and not necessarily on the OS, although we have seen both. There's a Conti ransom note here. I'm going to pause there and just note how odd that is. And that might sit odd with you all as well. We'll talk about that in a bit. None of this makes sense to you, the lover of logs, or to your analyst who's helping you. Meanwhile, back in the bathroom. Yeah, we just did our analysis in the bathroom. Stick with me here. It's fine. Everything's fine. You matched the hash of the mysterious I hope you washed your hands.exe on the USB drive. It's a Conti executable. Ooh, the plot thickens. I just like this meme. Let's go back to the lobby. Your analyst makes more progress on Mr. Merp's computer. What is this? In HKLM System Control Set 001 enum USB store. So this is where we're going to go if we're looking at things that are attached. This will do anything that's attached to USB. This is in your registry. Love this artifact in incident response, especially if you're doing any kind of insider threat case. But when looking at it, it's interesting because you see the date on it. In late May, you see May 31st, and this looks like the dirty drive. It's a match for the SanDisk markings that are on the thing that you found in the bathroom. And oh God, we hope that Mr. Merp washes his hands frequently. Also, we look at Mr. Merp's browser history. We see Telegram frequently there, and Discord is installed. That's not necessarily a red flag, but to see both and having a dirty drive, we start thinking, what do our threat actors do? Where do they talk to each other? What kind of communication forms do they have? Mr. Merp doing this on his laptop, probably not the smartest move by Mr. Merp, but this could be benign. So let's not assume anything like we don't in insider threat. However, we just said that, and then we looked at the shellbags data. So shellbags is going to show you file enumeration. And what it's showing us is that Mr. Merp is accessing a lot of sensitive files that also tend to sit over in that ESXi cluster in a file share. So it's not looking good for Mr. Merp. And there's an RDP session. Oh, let's talk about some favorite artifacts right here. So little known, and I encourage everybody off of this, if you are a fan of puzzles, I don't care if you don't do IR or if you don't do digital forensics, treat yourself at some point to going into the file system on a Windows computer and going under, I think it's like Microsoft Windows. I don't know. I'm dyslexic, so I can never list the directories in order. But if you just look online, where do I find bitmap cache? And that's bitmap cache. Bitmap cache, which is going to be a .bmc file, is located in terminal sessions. And Windows does this to make it easier when you have that screen sharing session over RDP. It makes it easier on itself by caching little bitty thumbnails so that there's no lag time in between that share, and it stores them. Now, why is this a fun artifact? Because it stores them in no particular order. It comes out like your worst nightmare 1,000 piece puzzle all garbled together. And there are a couple different tools now. Shout out to Brian Moran's RD Pieces that will use the pixels to reconfigure and snap together that picture for you. But if you're bored on an afternoon, you can also do it by hand, which is what we used to do. It's just get into your favorite software. Honestly, I used to do it because I'm really bad at graphics. I used to go into MS Paint. Why not use Windows against itself? Go into MS Paint and just like use the little select tool and copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, and suddenly you have a full picture of the PowerShell commands that have been running back and forth between this RDP session. You can also see everywhere they're clicking because, again, it's a screen share. So seeing, and I have had cases that do this, where you just watch the threat actor, oh, look, there's a window open with Veeam. That's the backup software. What are they doing? Oh, look, it's a delete request. And they're doing this in the UI, and it gives you everything. And it's very, it's a different kind of evidence because if you're talking to someone, especially if you're having to translate technical to non-technical, doing so with a picture is worth 1,000 words. Um, Absolutely love that artifact. So you find that RDP session in Bitmap Cache. But wait, let's go back down the hall. But what about Cloppity Clop? Aren't they behind Move It? I do this on purpose. Not a fan of threat actors, so yeah, why not poke a little fun? I mean, are they? They're certainly taking credit. This is something that I wanted to talk about, and why it's so interesting to say something early or speculate or anything else. So it certainly looks like Clop is behind Move It. However, that exploit was super complex for them. It's outside of the norm of the type of exploit they usually develop. So, not assuming that it's all in one, or going forward cautiously that it's them. Yes, yes, it's Clop, and we're seeing things pop up on their data leak site. But how could these two things happen at once? It's still not making sense, because we have encryption via Conti, but we have a Move It server. And why would they exfil from ESXi when they just have the Move It server? Well, let's check the system shutdown time. Let's see how long this thing has been online. My God, this Move It server, it was set up just before the ESXi got hit. It's a plant. Thus the meme. I don't know, I tried. Back to the computer. Okay, this is getting even more and more suspicious. But why click on the fish, Mr. Merp? Well, you see, the fish was just a red herring. I'm really proud of this one. I don't care. I've been sick for a week. This was hilarious to me. Given in front of a live audience, I was planning on this being a laugh moment. Doing so in the silence of my own home has a different effect on me. So we're just going to pretend that you all also find this absolutely hilarious. And I'm going to stay proud of this one. I don't care. Back to the lobby. But that Mitel device. Oh no, plot thickens. The shell is calling out still, but this creation date is from 2021. Okay, so what might this mean? Do we have the world's most devious and intelligent insider threat? Probably not. When two things just don't make sense in an incident response, and this is going to happen, more times than I'd like to admit, but it happens to everybody. When you go hunting for bad, you might find more than one thing. You might find extra bad. And extra bad, unfortunately, is not like winning an extra prize. Now, your incident responder and analyst might treat it like an extra prize because they found the thing, and that is like, yay, they celebrate that. But then comes the pain, and the pain is sometimes you do have more than one bad guy inside your house, or you did at some point in time. So you can find artifacts that are dormant. I can't tell you how many, I'll just call it out, ICS environments, so industrial control systems, environments that can't patch a lot. Usually you can find commodity crud in there, things that don't even call out anymore. Oh, energy drink, give me life. So used to make the joke, if you show me a plant of any kind, a manufacturing plant of any kind, I'll find you Andromeda somewhere in there. Andromeda was the most prolific botnet for a long time, and it has a very unique signature that is burned into my brain. It used to be a very cool party trick where I'd look at the alert for bad and just go, that's Andromeda. And sure enough, it was. Used to do that with Emotet too, because there were a lot of carrots and things that were in Emotet. It was very noisy. It was like you would have PowerShell, 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 blah, and then, So looking for bad, like we talk about this like it's some kind of, rocket surgery. It's not. you just get used to seeing things. So I also just want to open the door for anybody who's listening to this now and thinks I'm saying a lot of fancy things or that this is hard or something. It's just practice, and we play how we practice. So if you want to do this, and drink a lot of coffee, and have a lot of fun, but be at this kind of back and forth discovery, you can do it. Like this is not something that you can't do. So know that you might have to open another investigation. Don't make square pegs fit into round holes. You can treat two things separately if you can't tie them together, and your counsel will probably thank you for it later. When you do that, though, just quick note, and I am keeping an eye on the time. Separate the cases completely. You'll want to keep each one in different locations and treat them truly separately. Learn from a couple of cases that have not done that have made public news. When something is called into question, litigation is a thing that happens. You don't want everything being discoverable. So the more that you can, just like we talk about network segmentation and everybody groans because every network is flat, and we dream of segmentation one day, really you want to do IRK segmentation as well in the same theory, but knowing discoverability is a thing, and putting things in different boxes so that you don't lay bare your entire life before everybody who wants to subpoena you. But here's what really happened. Just kidding. This talk is only an hour. Let's talk about what this is. So, what happened here is actually chaotic. It's not always straightforward. It's a hell of a ride. This was based on real events. I actually took several cases and crammed them into this presentation. And I did it because this is very real, in kind of what we see, what we look at, what we go through, what we try and solve. The artifacts were real. Some of the case data is real. The insider threat piece is actually real. Have had cases where, and this is rare too, by the way. Typically, when you see ransomware go forward, or you see, a move it or something like that, it is what it is. Like it's not like these threat actors are necessarily trying to be super sneaky, and that they're doing things that are subversive. If you see Black Cat ransomware, it's probably Black Cat ransomware. But have had some insider threat cases where we'll do a full eviction, and what I mean by that is reset every password. You have MFA, you have cleanup on the shells that were there. You look down everything, and suddenly, after all of this activity, you see someone open the door. And that might look like an account letting in an IP address that is not their geolocation, and you see the MFA logs as accept. Insider threat is very real, and looking at that browser history, looking around the problem and trying not to assume might give you what you need to solve that case. And we have had that where you see this person going places that they shouldn't. And I saw that much more when I was in-house, doing IR, as part of an in-house crew. But it's not going to be often that you see insider threat in such a sneaky way. Unfortunately, for them, usually there's not a lot of forensics knowledge or anti-forensics, so to speak. And it's pretty obvious, right? And Mr. Merp clicking on that fish, man, he was trying to create a diversion. It just didn't work out for him. Quit while you're ahead, sort of. But all of these things happening at once, looking at all of the bad happening, having your sea levels reach back out to you and say, hey, we see a password spray, or we see this phishing activity. Is it the threat actor trying to come back in? Are all very, very real things that are happening as you're trying to go down this rabbit hole of something bad already happened. Um, and I think that Circle City really set up a great theme this year, and I want to give a shout out to them and thank them for inviting me to come do this kind of chaotic walkthrough of a scenario that was kind of clue-like, because this is exactly what it feels like. I like to play Tim Curry every day because when somebody asks you if you want to be Tim Curry, you say yes. And so just thank you for this. Thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions on incident response, how to do it, what kind of artifacts to look at, what's real, what's not real, what we should assume, what we shouldn't assume, please always reach out to me. This has been a hell of a ride and it's going to still keep going. And thank you. I'm going to open it up to questions, but I also think I promised kittens. So let me stop sharing for a second and push escape and see if I can get my husband to bring kittens, because I think I have 10 minutes for Q&A and also that much time for kittens. And I think, oh good, that was 43 minutes old. That was the, are you advancing your slides? Please, God, tell me that you all saw that whole slideshow. Okay. Thank you. 2 seconds. Sorry, this is all being recorded, so I'm just gonna say, Ophir, can you bring the kittens? Oh God, can he hear me? Yep, he can hear me. Is there a possibility to do Q&A? Because I did bake that in. I wasn't sure. Okay. And I think it's in in talk track. We should keep firewall logs. Yes, you should. That's an odd question, but absolutely, you should keep firewall logs. And I would say if you can, as long as possible, because like that Mitel thing. Here's some kittens for you. Like that Mitel server happened in 2021. Sometimes you have to go back pretty far. Uh, Usually DNS is the thing that you keep the least amount of time because it's super noisy. But most of your other logs, you want to default to around, 6 to 9 months or a year if you can. And especially in the cloud, that's a little bit easier. So with AWS or Azure, like having VPC flow logs, having your cloud front turned on, making sure X forwarded for is on. I'm trying to see. There's folks typing. Also, by the way, this is Mr. Merp. So please meet Mr. Merp. This is our insider threat. He's into everything. And this is the foster kitten. So he would very much like to squirm and jump down now. Any other questions? I see people typing, so I want to be polite and like give time. Also, fun fact, there was a completely different scenario that I had to write out. There was a case that I worked on that I kind of very much obfuscated that had to do with machinery that ended up in some water and failed because of news recently that seemed insensitive to do. So if you catch me at a future conference or in person when some time has passed, please ask me about that. But I just didn't want to be insensitive to current events or anything like that. But it is wild sometimes. And what I had to pull out of this that would have taken a little bit more time is talking through the extra scenario, which is system misconfiguration, and it happens a lot. So doing code reviews and looking for loops and looking for things and not assuming that you have a threat actor at all is also incredibly important. And checking against your own devs. I will say that while I'm while I'm waiting for questions and looking at the screen, one of my favorite queries to run that I probably shouldn't admit to um, is when I'm looking at logs early, I have a set of queries that is an or statement that has every known swear word. Uh, and I run that string both against full disk images as well as logs, especially when looking at Linux. And I like to play the game of, is this a frustrated developer or is this an attacker? And I will say that like 95% of the time, it's very relatable that it is a frustrated developer. Um, so if you ever see just effing work.sh, probably not a remote shell. That's probably your sysadmin. So I do love finding those because I feel like I've found my kin in different areas when I find those. Looking back, let's see. You have a cat information security officer. God, I wish. In my own house, yes. Um, let's see. Oh, good. Somebody gets my Twin Peaks references. If I can give anybody a gift off of this as well, I will say Twin Peaks is absolutely phenomenal, and it has 5 books that come after it. So highly recommend reading those. Um, da, da, da. Anytime you've had to tell an exec, no, the smoking gun is not there, we don't know, and how did that go? Oh, that is a great question. Yes, quite frequently, and it is. I lean and I highly recommend this. This is my best advice. Um, I like to lean on legal. Legal is your friend. Um, and I might have a side conversation with them first of, hey, there are implications if we get this wrong. Here are what those implications might be, but you're the lawyer and you're the expert, so we don't want to say anything wrong. Um, when I talk to execs, I keep a firm line of, I'm not speaking to you, my data is. I'm not talking to you, my findings are. And by doing that, I'm on the side of science and I'm on the side of not ever speculating. And that way, if I'm ever asked to speculate, those are some boundaries that we've set up to say, you know what? We might never know the answer to that question, but we're not in a good spot to say, hey, this is definitely so and so, or in my experience, it's been this before, because that can go down a scary path of, if more comes up later, you don't you can't walk back something that's wrong. You can go forward with something that was never said. So um but it's a great question, and sometimes it's to Odd Job's point in chat, lawyers have to defend you in court if necessary. Please make their life easier. Sometimes lawyers will give you a hard time, and I also have a trick for that, which is, in a deposition room, I would say these things. And usually that kind of puts things in perspective of, if you ask me as an expert witness, this would have to be my answer based on the data. And everybody off of that goes back into the mindset of, we're not just talking in a room on Zoom or on Teams. We're talking future state of, we have to get this right now because we might get asked about it later. Great conversation. Sorry that my chat wasn't keeping up. I'm scrolling up to see if there's any other questions. And I think we're at 5 minutes time. So I appreciate the cat gifts. Make friends with your legal team, make friends with your compliance teams. Oh God, please be friends to your compliance team. Those people have a thankless job. And especially now, one of the questions I've been getting a lot is, how do you even protect against an O-Day? And I'll just share that real quick because that is in everybody's minds right now. How do you even protect against an O-Day? Proactively is my best answer. Is it because I don't think it's a good answer to say you can't see what's not coming. You can actually protect yourself against an O-Day in some ways. Um, if it's application and it's something like Move It, where you have an application layer shell using the application against you, it's working as it's intended to function. That's a vulnerability of the software that's manipulating the software. It's not like you can protect or prevent against that. However, what I will say is that some things do save the day, and that is doing allow listing, sometimes geo blocking. It's not perfect because somebody can pivot and spin up a VPN anywhere, right? So geo blocking, not perfect, but it reduces your threat surface. So if somebody's being spammy and opportunistic, they're going to hit the low hanging fruit first. Um, Something like having additional log sources. It doesn't work with Move It, but like let's talk application servers in general. Having a WAF, and it's having that defense in depth. And then the thing that really saved the day is, there. I work somewhere that has managed services and is happens to be an EDR company. It was incredible to see because of the hook in, that ability to react and contain like real time, and the difference between the people who experienced it from that angle versus folks that didn't have that, it was kind of heartbreaking. So the more layers you can put in place, knowing security is a cost center, and that's hard for C-levels, so be kind to your C-levels sometimes as well. But the more you're able to put in place, usually the better the outcome, even if bad things happen. um, Knowing it can be worse, and knowing that sometimes, you know having something that is less impactful than the full losing the full um the house, losing a room versus losing the house is important. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Um, and yeah, I'm seeing some comments in here. Fan of fundamental security, absolutely. You don't have to overcomplicate things either. So like, God, if I can die on the hill of segmentation, I will. And to treat things in use cases and locking more areas of the company down, having that net flow and looking at what should talk, what shouldn't. And going back to the basics. Go back to the basics of and treat your sysadmins well and treat your network admins well, because they really end up being the heroes sometimes with their configuration, and partnering with them should always be a thing. Um, Aw, you guys are really, really nice. Thank you for bearing with me. I only have a minute. I'm just going to tell you all I am getting over pneumonia. I took a couple of hits of the inhaler before I started this. Um, Thank you for bearing with the coughing. Thank you for bearing with my early technical difficulties. For future speakers, if you're seeing this, share your entire screen. The Windows doesn't work, or perhaps it's my machine. But either way, I want to thank the organizers of Circle City. It is heartbreaking to me that this is the last one. I know there will be great things in the future, but please give them your love. It is a hard decision to make as somebody who works cons myself. There's a lot of emotion in this, and I'm just incredibly honored to be able to do this with you all today. Thank you all so much, and enjoy the conference.